And of course, I would now like to give the floor to Janet to introduce our super speaker, Bridgette.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So it's a privilege to have Bridgette with us today. So she's actually um, our professor, Nina and I, our professor back in Swinburne. So Bridgette is a academic working across design, strategic foresight, and culture. With 20 years experience in brand design and innovation strategy, Bridgette's work focuses on the potential of design and futures to tackle challenges intersecting people, community, and systems. Her career began at one of Australia's best-known design firms, and she has since been involved with creating brands you may use every day. Of course, this is in the context of Australia. Bridgette holds a BA and MA from Monash and a master's degree in strategic foresight from Swinburne. She is part of the team at Swinburne's Living Lab that's been working on VR, virtual reality, and augmented reality wearables for people with early onset dementia, and is a leading researcher with Project Wildom, a research initiative funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to develop the next generation condom. Bridgette is keen to see Bridgette is keen to see design shape preferred futures, not just the business as usual stuff we're told to expect. More importantly, she's interested in how our individual agency will help us get to better tomorrow. Through collaborations with all types and sizes of organization, her work spans strategic and speculative design, experiential and critical features, and design for transition. Let us all welcome Bridgette.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that. That's a lot of stuff about me. The one thing it doesn't explicitly say is that I actually ran a business, a consultancy, for 10 years officially, and I didn't know I was an entrepreneur. And the reason I'm sharing this is because I still do that, the work that I did in the consultancy, but it's taken on a different form because even though I set up the business and was doing okay, I had the opportunity to go and teach. So I decided to do that, which is partly one of the things that we'll be kind of looking at in today's session. The chances that we have to do things differently, but also the opportunities that come up. So when I was working in design, I'm not a trained designer per se, but I worked in design strategy. My first job was as a copywriter. There were opportunities that came to me. I said, oh, I'll give that a go. I'll work on that. And a few years later, I found myself finishing my second master's degree, but and then working more and more in a couple of design agencies. One of them then offered me a job. I didn't know that I wanted to do that, but it was an opportunity. So I ended up running a client service team. So I was an account director in this agency, and then I took on more and more responsibilities. I discovered that I really didn't like all of the admin stuff. So why I've decided I'd go and run my own business, I don't know, because there was a lot of admin with that. But it meant that when the opportunity to leave came, it was because someone said, you know, we'd love you to come and work for us and do something different for a while. And I thought that would be a good thing to do because I wasn't really enjoying my job anymore. And so I took the opportunity, but at the same time, it forced me to think, well, what else could I be doing? And I was only 3 months into that job and I realized that I missed doing some of the work that I'd been doing in the design agency. And so my next goal in my head was to think about how I would go back to doing that as a consultant. And then someone called me and said, you're now working in this other business, but you said that you're running your own team, you can make your own decisions about what you do as long as you bring in money, basically. And can you help us with this project? So I kind of morphed the role, not so much the role that I had, but the work that I was doing within this new company into the work that I wanted to do, which wasn't ideal for the company. So what I learned was, I had my own goals and my ambitions, but it didn't necessarily fit. It was great to have the money coming in, but it was too much diversity for the business. But what it did do was help me say, well, I'm going to leave and I'm going to set up my own thing. So I was the first person in Australia to set up a business that specialized in naming things. So my specialty then was verbal identity. So looking at names and tone of voice and things like that for brand. And I did that as an independent consultant running a business for 10 years. I still do a little bit of that, but along the way I picked up other things. entrepreneurship and innovation, that you see opportunities. They are things that you can go after, and in doing so, you have to consider what you might be giving up. But it's important that you continue to innovate. And I still do some of that all at the moment, or rather I will be. And a couple of years ago, I worked on a really large project, a naming project for a bank in Southeast Asia. And it's because of that specialization, but I know that that's not what I do only. So I have to think in terms of what is it that I'm going to be known for, and what is it I want to specialize in, because I can't be all things to all people. So I'm going to talk a little bit about design-led innovation, what you might know as design thinking, which is human-centered design. I'm going to talk about how you find opportunities. And a lot of the opportunities I had both in my the early stages of my career and then going into business were things that kind of came to me. But I also think that I made decisions based on what I knew was around me at the time. So we're going to look at that a little bit from a theoretical perspective. And then you're going to work on a hypothetical case study. So I've had a look around at what's been going on here in Australia, as well as through Asia, particularly Southeast Asia, and some of the challenges that we've had. And so I've got a very, very small case study for you to, or an opportunity for you to explore some of the tools. Now we've got a pretty jam-packed program, and I'm not expecting that you will be able to get all of that into your heads today. So you are welcome to take as many notes as you like. You can ask as many questions as you like, because I don't know what you don't know. But the other thing is I've got a list of resources. So I've got a Word document at the moment that I will tidy up with a whole lot of links to things that are freely available. So I don't want to bombard you with academic texts, but I want to give you links to things that you can read, a couple of books that are freely available, as in you can buy them. There might even be an ebook available online for nothing. And I don't want to use the academic stuff that's often hidden behind a paywall and also is not always that easy to make sense of. So I am going to run through some slides that I have corralled. I actually redid them this morning, so I thought, no, there's too much in there, so I've taken out stuff. But there will be supplementary things. And if at any point you want to know more about a particular thing, if you type in chat, then I might be able to reference something. But definitely come back to me with questions about stuff so that I can provide you with more resources. There's a lot of information available online, and it's just of varying quality. So I want to make sure that you get a chance to access stuff that is known, proven, and reliable. That it's something that it actually works. It's credible, which is not about the academic stuff. It's just being written by people who are not just talking about their own thing, they actually know what they're talking about. So I should at this point get my slide deck up. Are you happy for me to load my slides? And I will share my screen. I will just move that away. Okay, so this is when tech fails me. This one here. Yeah.
There. Yeah, we can see it now. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, I use the fancy pants slide deck because, as I said, I'm not a designer. And one of the things that is important in the content that we're looking at today, but also design-led innovation, is the principle of visualization. The reason we emphasize this visualization is not about making stuff pretty, but it's about it being a single point for people to refer to. So when you're working on things later in your groups, I might suggest that you use Jamboard or something like that, unless there's another tool that everyone wants to use. But the focus of visualization is being able to make stuff visible and have it present so that everyone can look at it and ask questions about it. Because we carry a lot of stuff in our heads, and the visualization emphasis within human-centered design is about creating connections, actual connections in the conversation, rather than people holding on to things that they think are important because they could actually be critical to a project that you're working on. So my first thing is, what is this design thinking thing? Design thinking was not invented by IDEO, but they've done a really good job of publicizing it and mainstreaming it around the world. Design thinking has its origins in other areas of design that goes back 40, 50 years. But for today, we're focusing on this process of design thinking, which is really human-centered design. So prioritizing the needs of people beyond the needs of business. And the argument for that is that if you're running a business and you're selling stuff because you think it's great, if people don't think it's great, they're not going to buy it from you and you don't have a business. So I was lucky when I was running my business, I had a service that people wanted. What I realized after a few years was that I was then skilling people in the knowledge and skills that I had, which meant that some firms stopped working with me. That's great because who were trained up to do stuff. But it also meant that I had to shift in what I was doing in order to have a viable business. And so this focus on people is something that larger organizations used to have and sometimes don't have now. But the core of it is going back to what people actually need, addressing the problems that they have, looking for things that might improve their lives or bring meaning to the things that they do. So that your business strategy is not just about getting stuff off the shelf and getting revenue through your business. It's about thinking about the value that you give to people, because that's what we're really looking for. People, as people, don't necessarily talk about the value that they get, or you might get a bargain and think that's really good value. But it's the value that you add to something that actually delivers that to people, that brings them back over and over again to the product or the service that you're selling them. The other thing about design thinking is, yes, IDEO has done a really good job of mainstreaming it, but there are lots of different models. What I'm going to focus on today are the core components of this human-centeredness. So the focus on finding a problem to solve, which is the opportunity discovery, figuring out the best way to approach that and why it is the right problem to solve, then drilling into what people need, so the benefit that you can bring or the things that they need to be solved so that you can deliver that. So regardless of the 3, 5, 6, 7 step, the diamond or whatever, and by the way, the image of the double diamond has just been changed again. And I was going to include it, but I haven't read enough about it. So the academic in me stopped putting in the diagram that I don't fully understand yet. This one I do, but the one that was released a few weeks ago, I haven't quite got my, my head around. So there's no one model for this, but there are principles that you can explore and exploit as an entrepreneur and as an innovator. And the issue for innovation is that if we don't keep innovating, then we'll end up doing the stuff that we've continued to have. That doesn't mean that you do innovation for innovation's sake, but you do need to innovate in order to constantly address the changing needs of people and organizations and our social fabric. So society changes and our needs change with it. We have to innovate in order to meet that. So what we're going to look at today primarily are creativity and problem solving, finding opportunities, what are they, where do they come from, and where you can go looking for them. This principle of human-centered design and innovation, and then putting design-led innovation to work, which will be you applying some of the things that you learned today into this hypothetical case study that I've created. The key areas of this, and this is following a list that this is what we want to cover. So I'm going to cover as much of this as I can in as much detail as I can. And you've got to watch my time because I will talk about stuff. So I'm not going to read off the list because that's bad presentation, but we're going to break it into looking at what is opportunity discovery? How do you go about it? What is this notion of problem solving? Because design and design-led innovation is about using design to solve problems. And that doesn't mean that we're all going to be designers in a technical sense, but it does mean that we're going to be able to design solutions to things. No, I'm not going to be able to redesign this little packet of lip cream that I have sitting on my desk, but I can tell you what I don't like about it as a person. I can tell you that when I've actually put the stuff on my lips, it's really hard to get it back on without getting smeary stuff all over the container. It also drives me nuts that it has this special little lid, which I know is there to keep it fresh and keep the dust out. But when I'm trying to put lip gloss on or lip balm on my lips, that is really frustrating. I can't tell someone how to redesign it, but I can tell them what's wrong with it. And that's what we need to interpret, is it? And that's the analysis of data and then the synthesis into a potential solution, which gets us into the tools that we use. So what are those tools for creative problem solving? What is creativity in itself? And then working into the design-led innovation. So focusing around those principles of visualization, customer co-creation, so actually working with the people that we're designing stuff for to understand their problem before we get into designing it. Because most of the time we think, oh, there's a problem. Yes, I'll find a solution. And that solution ends up in the market looking for a problem to solve because it's not grounded in people's needs. It's not grounded in evidence in the stuff that's actually significant and useful. And we'll touch a little bit on assumption testing and rapid prototyping. There we go. Bit of theory for you. You won't necessarily be able to find this article online easily. I don't expect you to. It's simply focusing on this early stage of the discovery process and thinking about where the opportunities are. In entrepreneurship, way down the process, once you've got into a business and you're thinking about it, but the principles of looking for the opportunity apply, whether you are at mid-stage or you are in applying principles of entrepreneurship, and which is often known as intrapreneurship, in a business that is actually going and going well. Opportunity itself isn't just an idea. We will have ideas. As I said, I would really love them to redesign this, but it doesn't mean it's a market opportunity. It doesn't mean that it's the right time. It doesn't mean it's necessary. And you know what? This is 12 months old. So maybe it's already been redesigned based on customer feedback. So what you want to think about is the opportunity to do something and do something differently. So it has to be attractive. It has to be something, and not aesthetically pleasing, but attractive. You know, a new product must be something that people want to try. A new service must be something that people want to use. It must be timely. Being an early adopter or an early innovator in a market can be really difficult because you're kind of setting the standard or creating a new market. And sometimes it's more easy than others, but most of the time it's getting the market into the time. And as an entrepreneur, your challenge will be to pick your time as to whether you want to be that pioneer because you've got the resources behind you to do that, or whether you want to jump in after someone else has maybe broken the barrier down a little bit. It also has to be something that will withstand the test of time. So being durable, that it's trusted, reliable, and so on, as well as being anchored in what I've said so many times about being anchored to the stuff that people actually want to use and buy. So some of the questions that you might want to ask, and these are things that you might want to bring in when you're thinking about your case study later. So who is the customer? Who is it that you're designing for? I'm apologising to people who've been in my class because they will have had me say this. If you don't have a who and a why, then you have nothing. You must understand really deeply who it is that you are solving problems for. Who are you designing things for? And you must be meeting their needs, not just your objective of getting rid of something or selling up something. Your core customer is critical. So it's understanding who they are compared to the other customers who might want to buy from you. And I'm going to flip between words like customer, client, and user because they will vary. And so if you think about your own business, it's the people who you are servicing or the people that you are providing products to. They're the people that you're designing for. You can also have internal as well as external clients and customers. So if you're in a service-based business, you might work inside a business where there are different divisions. Your customers or clients might be someone else in another department. So the language is the same, but there's a different dynamic because it's an internal customer or client. And this happens a lot in bigger organizations where the marketing department markets to people outside the organization, or the logistics gets deliveries to people, but they've got internal divisions who are also their clients and customers because they make sure that stuff gets there on behalf of the organization. So you need to be clear about who it is that you're actually servicing, who it is that you're providing things for. What do they care about? What's important to them? You should be prioritizing that because then you solve their problem rather than your perceived problem, the thing that you think is the issue they face. Which is also back to the addressing that problem right now. Is that someone raising their hand?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you will be discussing about number 6 already, but maybe I'm just too advanced. How we could really say that the problem can be solved in a unique way. In what way we could really determine that this particular design thinking can really solve the problem in a different way, or
Well, the challenge is to bring a unique set of attributes to the problem that you're solving. So there might be, you might identify a problem that no one else has identified, and therefore it has a degree of uniqueness. But the other thing is, and I'm going to go back to my little lip balm container, this is not the only brand of lip balm that's in the market in Australia or anywhere else. There's umpteen. I know that I've got 3 other different brands floating around handbags in my house. So the uniqueness of this is what they decide to do with it. It could be the properties, so what it's made of, the materials that are in it, and design thinking helps you work through what else is out there in the market. So one of the critical points is to go exploring, and that I'm going to talk about research in a sec. Not just looking at what you're doing, but looking at what is out there in the market that's being done differently. Learn from. What are the skills of people around you in your organization or in your family if you're in a small business or a family business? What do your friends tell you that they struggle with? So uniqueness is really hard, but what you're looking for is ways to differentiate what you think you're offering from others. And that's where the points of that design thinking, that human-centered design process, that can be enough sometimes, because there are so many organizations out there doing stuff the way they've always done it, rather than focusing on what people actually want and how they might use things. So that can be a market advantage for you. But the other thing is, as I said, understanding that, yes, there's a whole bunch of these other products out there, but what can you do that's different? And you might notice that there will be trends in the way things get packaged on the shelf, or there might be a product that does something differently and then suddenly everyone does something similar. It's because it was unique to start with and it's worked, and so people then try to follow that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about trends in a second. The other thing to be mindful of is, how big is the market? You know, what kind of market are you actually working towards? Is it a market of 20,000 or is it a market of 20 million? And be aware of what you can deliver to. This is one of the concerns with entrepreneurship and innovation, and small business in particular, that we come up with really great ideas and then we're not able to service the market. And so it's okay to have something that is different and in principle unique, because there will be enough people to support that market if you have, and to support your sales needs, if you have done your research and established that what you're working on is actually wanted and usable. So desirable, feasible, and viable, which is something I'll get to towards the end. You know, cost isn't everything, but there will be a limitation around what people are willing to pay for something. And that doesn't mean it has to be cheap. People will pay a lot of money for things if it is of value to them. And what is value and what is affordable will vary from person to person. And so when you're thinking about working on something, these are the things that you want to investigate in your research. I'm going to skip over this a little bit because I think I've touched on this to some degree, but it's looking externally. So what this slide is talking about are all of the things that are going on around us that we can look at. So whether it's economic factors or changes in technology, it could be emerging shifts in our society. So that could be around generational change. It could be about people moving to new areas to live or work. But you can also draw on what you know about what's going on around you. So your experience, what you pay attention to. I think one of the key traits of an entrepreneur is that you're constantly on the lookout for stuff. It doesn't mean you try everything, but you at least think about it. You observe what's going on out there, and then you're able to connect back the stuff that is going on versus what you see, and do that process of connecting the dots to potentially come up with a new business product or service idea. Please ask, what's your question?
Yes. What is your reaction? Because I always read about you have your passion in terms of opportunity recognition. What is your passion? And you have to put empathy in your project or in your idea. What is your take on this? You should be, there should be empathy and passion.
Yeah. So the first thing, and they're different. So passion is about stuff. If you're not interested and you're not committed to it, it doesn't mean that it has to be the thing you're passionate about. I've worked on a couple of projects which had absolutely no interest to me personally, They're not products or services that would be of use to me, but I'm very interested in the benefit they bring at a broader level, whether it be for a business or for an organization or for a community. So being passionate about something is really important, but it's passion to a degree that you remain interested in it rather than it just being your latest fad or thing that you are spending most time doing. So we have to understand the difference between stuff that we're really, really committed to versus the stuff that that's kind of interesting at the moment. What you said about empathy is a key part of that human-centered design process. And this is the ability to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. And this is why that research is so key. What we talk about with research and human-centeredness is being able to focus on the people that we're designing for rather than ourselves. Because quite frankly, there's a whole lot of stuff that I've worked on that is of no interest to me whatsoever. 15 years ago, when I was immersed in all sorts of banking and financial services products, I was thinking, why on earth am I embedded in this? I don't want to know about insurance for 65-year-olds. I don't want to know about wealth management tools. I was working on something that was for really high net worth individuals, which I will never be. But I had to just step back and say, these are the people I'm designing for. These are the people whose problems I'm trying to solve. Now, I'm not going to talk about the value set and the ethics of all of that, but it was them. They're the people who I'm solving the problem for. So I had to take a step back from myself. The one thing I always ask people to do is leave their subjectivity at the door. And it's a real challenge for young designers that they get excited about using something that, a font or a material that they like. You go, but it's not about you. You're 22. You're designing something for people in their 50s. They're probably not going to like the same thing. So think clearly about it. The challenge with this, though, is that empathy can be overrated. We must understand the people that we're designed for as best we can, but we will force ourselves to try and emulate their experience. What we can do is listen to what they have to say and pay attention to it, which is why as part of the assumption testing process, the prototyping, you co-create, get as much from the I will fall in love with something and then put it into testing, and all of my hopes and dreams will be dashed 5 minutes later because someone said, oh no, I'd never do that. Oh no, I think that looks really horrible. Oh, it's too heavy. Oh, it's too light. Oh, I worked on some credit card bundles a couple of years ago, looking at how we would package up different credit card formulations. So looking at products and features that we build in. And I sat there thinking, really, people? I never thought about those things being part of, but people told us what they would love their credit card to be able to do in terms of benefits or services that are provided. And this is that empathy point. But we do not underestimate the role of it, but do not overplay it, because sitting there to me, I can only assume that I'm sharing something that is useful, which is why your questions are so helpful, because I don't know what you don't know. You can observe trends, see what's going on in the market, but you can also look at emerging. And this is where last year is such a terrible year, and this year, as we're still going through the turmoil and the fallout, we're starting to see things that are emerging as our needs change. The trouble with trends is that they're current. So if you follow a trend and do what else everyone else is doing, following whatever everyone else is doing, but also it doesn't necessarily anticipate what's going to be going on 6 or 12 months from now. So you need to look out for what's out there, but you need to have a focus on where you want to go and what people actually want. And this is where entrepreneurs often have an advantage, because they can do things quickly. It's not like a big company that needs to shift a whole machine and hundreds of thousands of people and millions of dollars worth of product infrastructure over to something new. That's just too hard sometimes. But in the sense of adaptation and being agile, entrepreneurs are usually really good at doing that. And that helps us think about solving the problem that's immediate, and it's also about finding gaps. So I can buy this in these materials, but there's a gap over here, no one's making it like this. So there could be immediate problems that you can solve, as well as the gaps for things that haven't been done yet. Right. And often we'll slip between the language of a problem, a challenge, a gap, or an opportunity. It depends. These are the kinds of things that you might use as sources for business ideas. And this is kind of the process that you go through. So starting with a sense of what the problem is, opening up that problem space by doing research, bringing it back in and focusing around the thing that you want to address, so the problem you want to solve or the challenge that you think is out there or that opportunity that you want to pursue. Then you open up the space again by thinking, well, what are the different ways that we could do this? And then you bring it in the focus around concept development. And it is very much a mix of divergent and convergent thinking over a number of different stages. People have expectations that design thinking and human-centered design is quick. It can be, but it isn't always. And so the purpose of this is to think about how many times you can open up different thinking and bring in different things to influence potential shifts and changes, both in your approach to the problem or the opportunity, but in how you realize that solution at the end. Ideation in itself, which is one of the things that you will be working on today, is about doing stuff in the moment. We're looking to expand the possibilities. So that's that divergent thinking process and not looking at any constraints. So when I'm asking you a little bit later today to come up with lots of different ideas about how you might do something, then there are some rules that you're going to be following. You want quantity, not quality. There's no point coming up with one idea and getting stuck with it because we become fixed on that thing. And then when it doesn't work, we get really disappointed. Ideation is about coming up with lots and lots of crazy, wacky, and really ridiculous ideas. And the more ridiculous they are, the better, because it gives you a chance to not just challenge your perception of what might work, but build on the ideas as they emerge. You want to go beyond the stuff that is immediately obvious, and you absolutely don't want to criticize any of it at this point, because you're looking for flow and diversity, as well as the spectrum of ideas and the unexpected ones. Go ahead, please ask.
Yes, yeah, Bridgette, it struck me, the first line is quite interesting because we always like, for me, it's always quality against quantity, but now in terms of ideas, it's terms only, quantity, not quality. How can you explain it that more? Is it because you wanted more ideas to come in?
Yes, that's exactly it. Because you might come up with one idea and think, oh, yeah, that's the perfect idea. And launching it as a product, only to find out that people are not interested at all. So it's a waste of time and resources. The other thing is you need to get all of the quantity of ideas together so that you can figure out not just one little solution, but the bigger picture of that solution. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't want quality ideas, but you start with quantity. So the difference is that, again, they diverge and converge, but also generating lots and lots of ideas so that you can focus in on things that are actually different. And this is how you start to move towards that uniqueness. Because if you go, oh, well, there's all of these ideas and that's great, but these have all been done. Okay, what else is there? And your ideation process is only that early stage. You're not at solution yet. You are quite a while away from solution. And this is where, again, the distinctiveness and the innovation comes in. And the craziness, going beyond the obvious, is important. It doesn't mean you're not going to work towards a quality idea. You do down the track. But right here, right now, you just want lots and lots of different things to work with. And you will get to quality down the track. Is that another question? So if I'm going to talk, I'm just going to go, hang on, I'm going to go back. I'm going to touch briefly on these principles of ethnographic research. And I'm conscious of time at this point. So I might flip through a couple and just talk generally about the kinds of things that we would do based on ethnographic studies. We don't do formal ethnographic studies a lot in design, but we do design ethnography, and innovation will often rely on or shadowing, even mystery shopping. These are all ways that you can find out about stuff, whether it's going shopping with a friend to find out what they do or setting up a formal shopping process where you mystery shop. You can ask people to write in their day-to-day lives, or you can study something as a day in the life of. Now, these are all principles of ethnographic research, but they are also the things that feed off the opportunities that you see. So by looking external out into the market, You can then say, well, how do we find out about that? Because once you've identified a problem, you need to do research to understand it further. Secondary research is great. It will inform you, it will give you a starting point. The primary research is what you want to do with the people that you're designing for. And surveys are perfectly fine as part of that process. It depends on what you have available to you. There are organizations that specialize in this, but as entrepreneurs and innovators in our own businesses, we want to be able to draw on some of these skills and think about how we might go about it. So, for example, if you're running a services business, then there's nothing wrong with you doing a little bit of mystery shopping yourself and seeing what other businesses are looking at online, getting a hold of a brochure. I do this all the time, just to see what other people are doing and learn from that. When you've got all your data together, you need to find a way to synthesize it. You start with analysis and then you bring it together in a way that you can help think about the themes or the passions that are emerging. And the two key tools that we use in this, and one of them you'll work on today, is affinity mapping and empathy mapping. And we'll do a little bit of affinity mapping today. Affinity mapping is great because it allows you to organize all of the insights that you've got. So what we often see associated with human-centered design and design thinking is lots of sticky notes. This is the sticky note bit. So all of the things that you learn, all of that ideation that you come up with, all of that goes on sticky notes, and it might be digital sticky notes, but all of that goes on a wall, and then you start to look for the themes or patterns in those things. You're looking for shared experiences or associations with common problems so that you can start to say, well, this is actually a problem for these people. But for people over here, this isn't a problem because they do that. So you're starting to hone in on how it works. Really quick example is many, many years ago, I was working with a blanket manufacturer. So they made bed blankets. And I bought 22 blankets to find out how people buy blankets in Australia because the sales team had no idea how people actually buy them. They know how they sell them to retailers, but they had no idea how people bought blankets. Now, as a result of that, not only did I keep 2 of the blankets because I found them useful, but I also got insights into what people need when they buy a blanket. They need information. If there's no one there to serve them, they don't know what they're doing. So we made decisions to put information on of a blanket in the same way that a duvet or a doona might have a little warmth rating. We started to think about doing that for blankets. The only way I was able to discover this was by going out and buying blankets. I then brought that information back with the sales team. We talked about all of the different things about their points of contact, their sales channels, and we were able to integrate that. So we were seeing the relationships between people buying stuff, them manufacturing stuff, and then it being distributed into the stores. And it was through this kind of a process that we got all of that information, and we revolutionized the packaging, which was really kind of cool. I spoke before about visualization, so I just want to remind you that you're going to be visualizing stuff. You'll be using Jamboard and writing stuff in order that everyone can share it. Now, this is often what happens with brainstorming too. Someone will dominate the process, so I'm going to ask you to write stuff rather than just yell it out and talk about it. You need to have information stored visually so that it can be shared. There are other ways that you can visualize narratives, such as storyboarding, before and after kind of shots. This is the problem now. Wouldn't it be nice if we could experience it this way? And this is a great way of capturing that experience or that state change, going from the negative to the positive or the optimistic or the hopeful. You can visualize problems in an organization. This is an example of visualization, and it's an org chart. You can use this to realign instead of sitting and talking about how different things would be brought together in a business. You can use this kind of tool to do it, and you can recreate this with text boxes and lines in Word or PowerPoint or even in Jamboard, which is the tool we'll use. Key part. Types fictional profiles based on the data that you have in your research. So these are the people that you're designing for. They are representatives of the problem or challenge that you're experiencing, and they give a face to that so that when you're working on a solution or coming up with ideas and then getting towards the solution, you've got them constantly on your mind as the people that are benefiting from this. And it's another way of getting yourself out of the picture and your own assumptions and biases out of the decision-making process and bringing them fully into that process. And they're a great way of representing the people you're designing for when you're not actually procreating with them. Having people and working with them to procreate stuff is fantastic, but sometimes you just need other time to work without people around you, and personas are a good way of maintaining that. An example of persona, basic information about who they are, their age, other things that are important around their needs, desires, their goals, their motivations, what they want to get out of it. Because if your problem is identified and you start to articulate a solution around what it is that they need to get done, some terminology will refer to this as jobs to be done or their pains and gains. And you capture that in a persona so that you are focused on their needs, not just what you want to achieve for your business. Because if you don't produce stuff that people want, then you're not going to get anywhere. There won't be any sales. An example of personas that you can refer back to if you want to, online there are lots of examples, free templates that you can use to create personas that are good. The only thing I would say is that they're templates, so they're not going to be perfect. All businesses, all products, or services. You need to do some exploration around what's out there. Journey mapping is looking at the highs and lows, people's experience of something, and this is where you capture those pain points as well as those opportunities for you to make change. So in a journey map or an experience map, you're looking to lock in where there are potential spots for you to do something different, places for you to innovate or offer innovation in that process. Another example of a journey, this is beautifully sketched, this is not a first up, but it's a way of visualizing a different way. So don't get caught up with templates in Miro and Miro or things that you can download online. There are multiple ways of doing this, including just doing it in sticky notes on a whiteboard, which is actually my preferred way of doing things to start with, because it allows you to move categories around and shape it based on the needs that you need to do. One of this is one of my favorite tools, and it's one of the most important things to explore the problem at a speaker's level. So you're looking to use this for root cause analysis, asking why. Why do they do that? Why do they do that? Why does that matter? Why do you use it in a particular way? And you might use this as a question and answer process with a participant if you're doing a research study. This won't solve the problem for you, but it will help you identify exactly what is going on at the bottom of the problem. You'll get down to what's really happening. And it might take 3 whys, it might take 8 whys. But the general rule is around 5 whys. This is about deeper questioning and approaches to problem solving. Another important component is the design brief. So actually giving yourself something to design to. Don't do this before ideation though. Do your ideation, get all of the ideas out, and then go back and measure it against a design brief. Because that's a good way of getting rid of stuff that's either been done or might need to be improved. The design brief is a core part of this process, but don't let it block ideation. You want the crazy stuff to come out before you go into a design brief. The design brief helps you keep on track in order to get to the prototyping and testing, which is when you are looking at different forms of that possible solution. So you have sketches, storyboards that I was showing you before. It might be a roadmap. You might just be talking someone through how this new version of my lip balm container works. You might have paper prototypes, whether it's something for someone to hold, or it might be a paper prototype of a digital interface showing someone roughly what might be part of the layout. There's also ways of role-playing to mock up a conversation that you might have someone. So if you're redesigning a sales process, for example, you might have someone role-play with you so that you could test out your new form of service or the new structure of your service. You might also do it to check a conversation if you do telephone sales. So there are lots of different ways that you can prototype. And the point of all of it is to get feedback so that you can improve what you've done. Because generally, the prototypes are nowhere near what you end up with going into market. And they are there for testing. They're there. Which is the next bit. Figuring out what people want, what's financially viable at a business level, and what you have the capacity to do as a business. Now, there are great stories of businesses pivoting from one thing to another. I'm sure you've heard of Nokia. They went from distribution and logistics to telecommunications. It was because they had this core technology and they had the money to make it happen. So pivoting isn't easy, but you've got to look at this intersection for your assumption testing about what people want, what you can actually do, and what is financially viable. Sorry, that's my large dog barking in the background. He obviously agrees with that. When you're doing your assumption testing, remember it's about feedback. So you've got to choose the thing that you want to test, and you test one thing at a time. So don't test a whole bunch of things. To go back to my lip balm container, don't test whether you want it made out of glass and whether you want a black lid and whether it needs to be a different size. Test each of those things separately. So get feedback from me on the opening and closure. Get feedback from me on the storage component, so the extra layer that's in the top. Get feedback from me on the materials, whether I want it made of glass or whether I want it made of something different. Test one thing at a time, and you really focus on the things that will be valuable, so delivering value to your customer or client, as well as delivering value into your business, and the things that you can actually do. Because if you test something you can't do, then it's probably a waste of time. So think clearly about how you, strategically about how you do this, and also use it to gather evidence to argue that case. Now, this applies whether you're going for funding to do something, whether you've got to manage upwards with a boss who says, no, we'll never do that, or whether you need to pitch it to someone else, or whether you just need to persuade yourself and your team that you want to do this. But the evidence is there to argue for the case that you're putting forward. And now questions. And I'm actually going to put some lip balm in at this point.
Thank you so much, Bridgette, for that lecture. Wow, it's like there's a lot of concepts to grasp. I myself was wondering oh, okay, so that's how we're gonna do it. Okay, so thank you for that. From our participants, do we have any questions? The floor is now open. Any questions or clarifications from our participants?
Yes, Ms. Eds, good
yes,
morning.
Good
Sorry,
morning.
my apology for my last attendance.
Go ahead. No, it's okay. It's all right.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for being here.
It's very informative discussion with Bridgette, and I think my only concern is sometimes when you go along from ideas to concept development, there are barriers, and I'm just wondering if Bridgette could provide us some inputs on how we could really, overcome these barriers. Sometimes we feel frustrated, we have all the ideas, and suddenly you stopped. And you go back again to the first one, and then maybe at the end, ayoko na, I don't want it to be.
No, I think you are right. There are often barriers and hurdles to getting stuff done. And it can be ourselves, it can be our capacity, so the business being able to produce something. It could be that we haven't checked for market readiness. There are, and you can use something like a stage gate process to work on this, but it's a different kind of level of assessment for an innovation process. What I'd be wondering is, what are the particular hurdles? Is it because you come in from a business? Is it because or how to make something? So be really clear about what the hurdles are, whether they are because maybe you're not tackling the right problem. Maybe you are too fixed to a perceived solution. Maybe the people that you've spoken to have given you the information that you need, so you need to do more research. Maybe you need to go back over your problem. One of the things that I haven't said explicitly is you start with a problem which might be perceived, but actually in that research stage, you're likely to check in and validate and confirm whether that perceived problem is really the problem that you need to solve. So there are a number of different steps along the way. However, identifying what the problem is can be a problem in itself. Some people won't own up to it. Some organizations are hesitant around innovation. Some are concerned that they don't have the money to do something, and so they won't take that leap of faith. And that's one of the biggest things with this process. So we're dealing with qualitative data, not quantitative. And when you're working with what people think and do and what they say and what they feel, it's much harder to argue with external organizations, whether it's someone who's funding you or a legislative body that's saying, why would you do it this way, when you have qualitative data as opposed to quantitative. So, I mean, if you've got a specific example of a hurdle, then maybe I can respond to that better.
Yeah. right now I'm really working in a permanent job, and I have so many ideas on how I could be, with my passion to do something for my community, but with my work at the moment. And then the other thing is the financial burden or the requirement to pursue with your idea. I
Yeah.
think that's the two things. No, I am a permanent working in a government right now, and the second one is the financial requirement to do that kind of
So if you haven't done it already, and forgive me if you've done all of this, but I would still go through this process and validate whether any of your ideas are something that can be commercially viable. That would be the first thing, is to go through that process. Like, I've got all of these ideas, go out and see what is in the market. Is anyone doing anything like this? If there is, what are they doing? What are the complaints about it? Have a look at feedback and customer reviews. Learn from all of that, because the first thing you want to do is validate whether any of your ideas are potential solutions to your problems. Because I've got a heap of ideas, but they probably only work for me. And if you've done that, then get into a more process of researching what you think that problem is and start getting some data around it.
Yeah.
It's not hard to run a survey. It's not hard to persuade people to, you'll take them up for a coffee and have a chat and do an informal interview. But again, be wary of who it is that you are solving the problem for. It's no good talking to me about a problem if I'm not the person that you think has the problem. So you need to focus in on who your potential clients, customers, and users are. And that's not always going to be easy. So you can think about whether there are direct connections with people or whether there are indirect connections. And don't underestimate the power of social media. The other part of this, which I haven't spoken about, is protecting your intellectual property.
Yeah.
So if you've got really good ideas for stuff that you don't want to get out to market, then you're probably not going to put a question on Facebook or in a WhatsApp group saying, I've got a great idea for a new whatever, can you give me some feedback on it? Because if it is a really good thing, then you started, obviously it's not a fully formed thing, but you're starting to leak that you've got a good idea. So my advice is, if you've got all of these ideas, I'd start with some validation that they are ideas that potentially solve real problems, as opposed to just, I mean, I've used this a lot because in Australia we seem to like developing new coffee brands and new water bottles, and we don't need another water bottle and we don't need another brand of coffee.
Thank you very much.
Does that help?
Yeah, yes. It clearly something to take on board. Thank you.
Bridget, I have a question. With all of the process right now that you've been discussing, I understand it's going to be a different scenario pre-pandemic. So how much have changed now that we are operating in a different world, like everything's online? Observations can be, tricky. So
Yeah.
what are the insights that you have gathered in the past year that would help our entrepreneurs here?
Heaps and heaps has changed. Some things have got much harder, obviously. Some things have actually got a lot easier. Whereas a lot of ethnographic research was all about going into people's homes and talking to people and doing in-context interviews and getting them to do stuff face-to-face. Clearly you can't do that when you're in a pandemic and lockdown, but we're still developing stuff. So there's been a lot of innovation within innovation about being able to find out information from people. But what it's also do is it's forced innovation in businesses, which is part of the little case study that I've put together. It's forced innovation for companies who weren't able to do stuff. So all of those, and I will speak from what I've seen around me and what I've experienced. All of those restaurants in Melbourne who said that they couldn't do takeaway and suddenly could do takeaway because it meant that there was revenue. There's a number of restaurants in Melbourne who said, no, they will not continue to operate because that's not part of their dining experience. So they just closed their businesses, which is really, I mean, it's sad, but it was a conscious decision that they have made. There's also been the challenge around actual trade. So getting things from one part of the world to the other. We had shortages. The toilet paper shortage is notorious. Which was silly because it was people's panic response rather than a thing that was grounded in reality. But we did have shortages of stuff because of trade relations and people not actually being able to deliver stuff. So there were small, not bad, but there were small issues experienced with some computer parts. There was pressure on some supply, but also I think we saw it with the ship that got stuck in the Panama Canal. That actually slowed down delivery of some things to other parts of the world. So pandemic is one thing, but other things affect us. So this is where, with that opportunity discovery, you think, well, what are the things going on in the world that might make a difference, that might challenge us? There are businesses that didn't know they needed, that they could make hand sanitizer, for example. So a couple of distillers, 2 companies in Australia that made gin, and they made it for premises. So it wasn't something I could go to the store and buy myself. They moved because they had alcohol. So they started making hand sanitizer. There were people who had previously been making backpacks for kids to go to school, and suddenly they found themselves making lots of masks for people. So the ability to look at your skills and shift is critical, but it's also knowing what resources you have available to you, because again, you're faced with that supply and demand, and if you make a commitment to doing something and then you can't deliver it because you don't have resources. We had an elastic shortage in Melbourne. I don't know if you had the same thing. So because everyone was needing masks and they didn't want to buy the disposable ones, and when they could buy it was, or they couldn't buy the disposable ones because there was a shortage, people started making them. And then there was an elastic shortage because people were making them. So, yeah. So what happened, a friend of mine who was making them then said, well, I'll just chop up old t-shirts. And so she used the jersey in old t-shirts. She then got a lot of attention to her masks because she was upcycling fabric. So she wasn't going out and buying fabric, and she was going to op shops and buying stuff. Online shopping was something that boomed, obviously, but that also brought the side effects. Companies that specialized in packaging boomed. There was a lot of cardboard boxes, but what we have now in America, for example, is an insufficient service for recycling. So there's a build-up of cardboard on the streets and not enough pickup services to get it into recycling. So Visi in Australia, which does a lot of work in the US, has been published because they have the capacity to do it. For small businesses, for entrepreneurs, there will be opportunities. The issue is size and scale, and knowing that you can focus on this bit rather than all of this bit, and then scaling out over time. Can I answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. And we have the same scenario here. So some of like the alcohol makers started making disinfectant. But I like the last point of choosing a specific area of the business and scale it up. So you don't need to go all in, like all out with all of your strategies, and just like choose one and make it work. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll go back to my friend who's making masks. She now specializes in making masks from upcycled, recycling fabric, so reusing stuff. I've got another friend who had a similar proposition. She was working on masks for particular needs, so making them so that if you had a hearing aid, it was easier to wear, because she uses a hearing aid. So she was looking at, and it's not perfect yet, but she was working on designs for people who wore different kinds of hearing aids so that it wasn't too hard to do stuff. So very small, and she might sell a few thousand masks, but that's all she needs to sell.
I agree. And
Yes. All right. So thank you for that lively discussion. I was actually able to learn a few tips, but